Hello, everybody. It's Bridget Plass here.
And Adrian as well.
Yeah, and that sounded seriously odd, Adrian. I think we'll go back to our normal way tomorrow.
Well, where I start?
Yes,
Oh, all right,
I
then.
think so. But
Okay.
we tried to do something different because it is the first one of Sounding the Shallows.
Yeah, it's week 1. It's no longer days. It's weekly, and it's sounding the shallows.
If you manage to
learn to say
pronounce
it,
it.
yeah. Actually, first of all, though, we wanted to say a very sincere and a really big thank you to so many people who have been with us over the last 9 weeks, and we've heard from lots and lots and lots of you, and I can tell you we honestly love every single communication that we get. So thank you so much.
We really do. And we've had our first anagram.
We have, yes, the end of No Shore in Sight, and now it's
Sounding the Shallows.
And someone has provided us with an anagram. I'm not sure what it means, but I'll tell you it. An anagram of Sounding the Shallows is Snowland Lighthouses. I'll say that again. Snowland Lighthouses. Now, that's the sort of thing someone might draw, but I'm not quite sure what it means. But thank you very much for that. I can't believe the amount of work that must have gone into doing that.
Oh, no, but I'm quite sure there'll be other... Do you call them anagrammists, people who do anagrams?
I think there's probably some other word that was probably
well, anyway, I'm quite sure that there's some people who might like to have a go at our new words. One of the things that we asked you if you would like to let us know about at the end of our last episode was about legacy. It was to do with the fact, if you remember, we were talking about Rahab, and we were talking about the fact that because she looked after the spies that Joshua sent into the city, when the walls of Jericho were knocked down, just her little tower remained because she'd put out a red handkerchief, and so her little bit wasn't knocked down. That was something that remained after everything else had crumbled. And we asked you if you'd like to tell us some of the things that you feel has been the legacy from this time. And it has been quite fascinating to hear from you, so many of you. I think quite a few people have been very, 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 very busy before lockdown. That's the impression I get. Again and again, we've heard how good it is to guiltlessly, because it's been taken away and you haven't given it up, not had to do a lot of the things that you were doing. Some of them may have been fun. There's one person talks about lunches, groups, voluntary work. So many things that she was doing that her husband said she was never in. For her, the legacy has been maybe getting to know her husband a little bit more, but also just enjoying being given permission to stop. And somebody else talked about their confidence that had grown in them to speak to people in their road, over the road that they hadn't spoken to before. Somebody else talked about having a longer time to pray, just a sort of new rhythm, a peacefulness that gave it. It's this permission thing almost, Adrian, to stop, really.
Yeah, I think the prayer thing is interesting because people are. I don't for one moment say people don't tell the truth, but people are being very honest about what's happening to them, and spiritually, if you want to put it like that, people. This person who's praying much more is really into it, and really finding that it means something. And I really like that. There's a lot of false fire about, as Malachi puts it. And it's good to hear these things. It really is.
And creating new rhythms in order to actually get a structure. A lot of people are creating more of a rhythm of prayer, which I think
we're much more into a morning prayer thing between us now, aren't we?
We are.
We were. It's a kind of organised.
I'm only smiling because I think our last one was about bustling about. It's a good thing that we're not bustling about so much. But then there's Zoom, of course, and we heard from somebody in New Zealand who's found it tremendously helpful.
Well, it's really amazing. I mean, he's the scoutmaster in New Zealand, and they've been communicating by Zoom with a scout troop in the Isle of Wight. And I think there's going to be some kind of reciprocal thing going on later on. But that's really energizing, isn't it? And I have to say thank you to this gentleman who we have heard from a few times, because he made a comment in his email that I thought was really good. He said, "There's nothing like," and I probably got it slightly wrong, "nothing like being boxed in to get you thinking out of the box." So that's clever, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think he's probably absolutely right as well.
Yeah.
So thanks.
Yeah, and one more positive one is an awareness that actually they are understanding more about Christians all over the world who can't ever actually meet in reality, who depend upon all sorts of very quiet underground ways of meeting.
Yeah.
Somebody else said that they understood much more about disability, about what it's like to be locked in to your own situation and dependent on other people to do things for you. But then one or two people, and we had one really, really difficult legacy, which was that she had felt that she was on a bit of driftwood, really, that hardly anybody had called. She'd felt more alone than ever she had in her life. And we know of other people, of course, who've had loss and pain that's never going to go away, and mental health situations that have erupted during this time, and we know all about that. And so
some people have had a rubbish
time, not in a nice boat, and then other people feeling guilty. It's just a time maybe to look at all that and try and get it in perspective. And there's still time to rescue people if they're hanging on to bits of driftwood. We're not at the shore yet.
No, that's why we called it Sounding the Shallows.
Exactly.
Because we're trying to work out how to land and what's involved in all that. I
think one of the things about emerging from the total lockdown, and we'll stay with the boats for a bit, is that you're aware, really, that you're not quite as wonderful as maybe you thought you were, because you find yourself maybe feeling a little bit envious as you look around, maybe you felt you're in a little tug and there's somebody in a beautiful yacht. Maybe you haven't been perfect in your thinking.
Well, let's go back to the good old sacred diary now, because that particular thing actually happened to us, and this bit from the diary is largely based on fact, I have to say.
Very much so, Adrian.
So for those who don't know, Bridget and I and our children went to a big festival, and the weather was absolutely dreadful. And this is kind of what happened, with a bit of exaggeration. Arrived at Let God Spring into Royal Acts of Harvest Growth around mid-afternoon. Anne and Gerald and I, we erected our new Tornado Tough frame tent in no time, despite high winds and sheeting rain. After checking out the toilets, we walked up to the shop. We passed our magnificent new tent, standing tall and proud in the face of the gale. A little further on, our magnificent new tent passed us, flying through the air like a huge, mad red and blue sail. We caught it eventually just outside Richard and Doreen Cook's Super Safari Complete Comfort vacation van. I could see Richard inside, drinking tea and reading a Bible in the warm. He nodded and smiled and mouthed the words, "Praise the Lord," at me as I wrestled with my appalling pile of soggy canvas. I mouthed something succinct back. Everything was soaked down in Wetbridge Laundrette when we went down to dry it all. Too late to pitch the tent again when we got back. We went to the Let God Spring into Royal Acts of Harvest Growth office, where a wild-eyed person, who kept saying this was the last year she'd do it, gave us the key to a tiny refrigerated cowshed where we're about to stay the night in strange contorted positions. Sunday morning. Down to Wetbridge Laundrette again, with clothes soaked by rain coming in through holes in the refrigerated cowshed. A surprising number of people down there at 7:30 in the morning. One couple who'd spent the night in 6 inches of water were anxious to get back in time for the marriage fulfillment seminar. Seemed a bit desperate, really. Got back and pitched the tent again. Drove pegs through anything that flapped.
So based on truth. And I remember it ever so well, looking at the caravans, looking at the statutory mobile homes.
That's right.
And not feeling very Christian.
No, well, it's not just not feeling Christian, it's feeling what you actually feel.
Well, that's true.
And we hated them and would like to have killed them, really, just gently.
Temporarily.
But one very interesting point, and serious point about that is that we do have the most dreadful thoughts sometimes.
Of course we do.
Some things come up in us, and we look at them and we think, how could I think that? How could I feel that? Yes. How could I ever? Yeah. Oh, it's awful. Well, I think one of the lessons as we move in and try to get back to whatever within the metaphor dry land is to just give ourselves a bit of slack here, because when those things erupt, and they do in me sometimes. Just 2 days ago, one dreadful thought I had. You acknowledge it. Maybe you laugh a bit at the ludicrousness of it. You put it on a shelf.
Yeah, or you give yourself a bit of a telling off.
You don't.
Quickly and just.
You can do, but just say to yourself, that actually is not what I want to be.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put that on a side. I'm going to remember it, so it might help to remember that you need to be careful about these things and move on. That's what being a Christian is supposed to be, because those things have been sorted in a mystical way that I can't explain in 2 minutes, but they've been sorted. So let's try and live with that. Yeah.
Well, one little legacy that I didn't mention for me was a real pride, not in myself, but in the way the church has coped. And by that, I don't mean the major statements, not that I've personally had a problem with those, but I mean the way the little churches have coped. Yeah. And if we're thinking still with boats, and I think we'll have to leave boats soon, but little boats are perhaps more flexible. But even the big boats, the big strong liners, they've broken things down into small boats, into little groups of people. And there's been a growing sense of community, I think, in a way that maybe we've not really valued. It may have been there, but I'm not sure we'd valued it really. So
it's been an odd thing, hasn't it? The big churches, mainline churches, have been criticised a bit for making certain political comments and not commenting on other things. But the fact is that in churches all over this country, people are working really hard.
Yes, carrying on with food banks, carrying on with looking after neighbours. Us, of course, have lots of other people, and I know we've said that before, Adrian. I heard something on the radio with somebody who's got a disability and has opened up the staying in with 2 N's on the inn, so that there can be Zoom contact. I see where they're going. I know.
And there's a whole community of frog worshippers just down the road from here who are doing amazing work with amphibians. No, they're not. No, but there's a lot of stuff going on.
There is.
One of the things that strikes me is that there is a need for care, and a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about over the next few weeks is probably about that.
Yeah.
But it did remind me of a limerick I wrote once, which I'm sure you'll be thrilled to hear. It was based on the fact that there was a competition on the back of the Times, just near the crossword it was, and it was really an advert for Taylor's Port.
Uh-huh.
And this is many years ago when we had no money and couldn't afford port, wasn't it? And we love port, especially for communion. It gives it a richness.
Just keep going.
Sorry. So what you had to do was you had to write a limerick in which the words Taylor's and port occurred. Okay. And then you sent your limerick to Taylor's with a label from the front of a bottle of Taylor's Port. So obviously the idea was everybody would buy the port. You'd send it in. One person would win, I don't know, a few bottles of port, and that would be the end of it. So I wrote 2 limericks. I only read you one of them. This is the one I wrote, and I don't know. Anyway, this is what I wrote. Any port, got that right? Any port in a storm, cried the sailors, while plying their pumps and their bailers. But I said, I think I would much rather sink if there's no guarantee that it's Taylor's. See? Now, would I have won? I don't know. Is there an employee of Taylor's listening? Maybe the time has come to judge that little entry in your competition.
Yeah, because we didn't actually have the money to buy the bottle of port that was needed for the label.
No,
but it is quite important, isn't it?
I think that there is a real danger, and it's one that I've encountered, we've all encountered, that because you want to feel safe, you go for the first thing that appears. That you say, I just want to feel my feet on solid ground. I don't care what it is, but I think there's a good reason to be a little bit cautious.
Yeah, and this is a really good time. One or two people have said a time to just bob about, really. We're sticking with the water quite well, actually, but just sort of look and take stock and not rush into anything at the moment, because it is a time for decisions, isn't it? I mean, do you send your children to school? Do you not? There's a lot of decisions at the moment that a lot of people are having to make. Shall I go to the shop? Shall I not? How many people should I meet up? Is it all right? All these things. There's a lot of wariness in a way that's amazing. We don't usually have a chance to take stock, really.
No, we've been pushed into taking stock, really, and for us too, we're asking ourselves what the future needs to mean for us. It's
That's
not
true.
easy. And also there are some really important decisions to be sorted out. Now, I'll tell you one, we only did this morning, and some of you will understand how important this is, okay? We both really enjoy coffee, okay?
We do.
But when we put our coffee in a normal cafetiere, sometimes Bridget puts it in, and sometimes I do.
Yes, I do hope you're listening to this. This is quite serious.
It's very, very important. Now, Bridget, tell people how much you put in.
Right, I will. I put in 3 heaped dessert spoons and a little bit.
Right. I put in 3 level dessert spoons and a very heaped one. Okay? Now, this morning, we finally decided to decide the difference between Bridget's amount of coffee and my amount of coffee. So while Bridget was out, I got a wine glass and I put my 3 level dessert spoons and a piled one into my wine glass. I covered it with a kitchen towel held on by a rubber band. We know how to live here, I tell you. And then Bridget came back and I said, the testing bench is ready for you.
You did?
There was a wine glass, exactly the same size, and the coffee container. She took a spoon and she put her
I put my 3 heaped ones and my little bit
one into that one. And then we stood the wine glasses side by side, gave them a little shake to make sure the coffee was level, stood back, and they were exactly the same.
They were.
Now, I think God is in that, don't you?
Well, we thought they must be similar because it always tastes the same.
Yes,
but
that's
no,
right,
that was a big decision.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was. It was.
yeah,
It goes alongside other big decisions we've got to make, I think.
We also were thinking about the fact that this might be the time to be ready to be excited.
Yes.
Yeah. We don't know what's going to happen. We might feel there are deficiencies, inadequacies in us, but you never know. You really, really never know. And some of it is about seeing a small opportunity or a small window in your life where you could do something that might change things.
We were thinking about this, weren't we, and trying to remember when there was a time when something kind of, an opportunity sort of shot into our lives.
Yeah, well, we used to work with children in care, and one day we saw an advert in the paper saying that one of the TV companies was looking for ordinary people, that would be us, and that's what we were and are, ordinary people to be in a late night television program, short television program. And we went through a whole palaver with this. We had to write something. We had to go up to London. We had to be filmed, which was absolutely terrifying. And we came home and thought we'll never hear any more about it. And finally, they contacted us. Someone came to see us and said they'd like Bridget to take part.
That's true. They did.
It was one of the few times in my life where I actually was sort of sacrificial. I thought, if I'm not nice about this, this is going to be dreadful. So I said, oh, that's wonderful. And Bridget said, well, do you not mind? I said, well, I mean, it would be nice, but I'm not that bad anyway. So she went off and started. A few programs later, I was involved as well. And that, going to do that, eventually ended me writing articles in
That's true.
a magazine. And because of that, the publisher contacted me after I'd started doing a column in a... So all I'm saying is one little advert, a bit of thought, and you don't know where it will lead. So it's always worth just keeping an eye out for things.
Again, it's a unique opportunity, isn't it? It's a time that none of us have known before, where you are looking around and you might see something new that you get involved in, something unexpected that comes to you that you think, well, maybe this is the time to have a shot at that. Or maybe a time where you can say, no, I'm not doing that anymore. This is the time for me to say no. How interesting this time is, really.
Yeah, it is.
And it is also a unique time, isn't it, to be aware of the dangers.
Yeah, one doesn't want to go on about dangers, but we were remembering the fact that when I began this business of going and speaking and stuff, there were some very, very obvious pitfalls. I know because I banged my knee on several of them. And I wrote something that was really for me as a reminder that you've got to be careful. And I'll read it to you. It's called Ministry. And some of the things in it are kind of fossils, aren't they?
They
from
are.
the 80s, but I've left them in because they were part of that time. I want to have a ministry. I want to be profound. I want to see the folks I touch go spinning to the ground. I want to use a funny voice, mysterious and low. I want to spot uneven legs. I want to watch them grow. I want to have a little team, no more than 2 or 3, a totally devoted group whose ministry is me. They'd keep an eye upon my soul and tell me how it looks, and even more importantly, they'd help to sell my books. I want to send my prayer list out. Full colour ones look flash. The ones that say, oh, I'm greatly blessed and could you send some cash? I'd send them out by first-class post and please the folk who got 'em by putting little written bits in biro at the bottom. I want to be a humble star at major church events. I want to lead obscure seminars in great big leaky tents. I want to say how I deplore the famous Christian hunters. I want to sign their Bibles and refer to them as punters. I really want a ministry. I want to alter lives. I want to pray for something dead and see if it revives. I do. I want a ministry. I'm sure it's all been planned. And I'll make a start as soon as God removes the job in hand.
And I think that did help to keep you safe.
It certainly was part of the safety mechanism. Yeah, it was.
So it's a time to be aware. It's a time to take stock. It might be a time to stop. It could also be a time for you to send us some anagrams.
Yes, true.
And
Anagrams.
it would be great to hear about first times as well. And we'll have a look at those next week. Not tomorrow, but next week.
And thank you very much for listening to the very first Sounding the Shallows.
Yes,
And,
absolutely.
I hope you'll be with us for a few weeks.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much.
And
Bye-bye.
we'll see you soon.
Yeah, we will.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.